Welcome to Waters Ironworks. We're continuing with the ABANA National Curriculum. We're looking at lesson 1.6, which is forging an S-hook. Couple different things that we're going to do in this. We are starting with the recommended 5/16 steel, 8 inches of it, and we need to make some 1-inch diameter eyes on it. If you do the math on that, like we did in the last video, that winds up requiring 4 1/4 inches of steel if you want a completely enclosed eye, if you want to wrap it all the way. And I think we got a couple ways that we can cover it. It is an S-hook. We can leave it open. We don't need to wrap it all the way. Still have the 1 inch across. And I think that's probably what I'm going to go for. An alternative would be that we could get some length by drawing this out, putting a round or a square tape or something like that on it to get us a little bit of extra length so that we can get those 1 inch diameter eyes. But I think we'll just wind up going and putting a nice chisel points or something like that on here. Nothing too complicated. Maybe we'll flare it out a little bit, do kind of a fishtail scroll sort of look to it, and then wrap this around. We do have a mark on the horn in order to measure this. Again, I could mark here, but because I'm going to be leaving this open, we'll just play it by eye a little bit. I know I'm going to want to go somewhere most of the way towards the halfway points, maybe a little shy of it, but there's really nothing super complicated about this project. It is the first time we're doing scrolling as we go through the ABANA curriculum though, so when we get to the scrolling, we'll take a closer look at exactly how to scroll something effectively. Let's get this hot and we'll get it knocked out. Since we are going to be looking at scrolling, let's make this first one a square taper actually. We'll do it here at the horn on the anvil. Not the horn, that was the edge of the anvil. We'll make a nice little taper here, and then we will really over-explain every step of making this point. Let's get it hot one more time, and then we'll start. What we're gonna wind up doing is pushing just a little bit over the edge of the anvil. Come in, we're gonna give that a hammer blow. We're gonna push out a little bit more. We're gonna give it another hammer blow. Push it out a little bit more, give it another hammer blow. And that'll start curling this down. It'll eventually run into the edge of the anvil. When it does that, we're gonna flip it up and work it back this way. But we'll take a look at that step by step. So come in, we've got a little bit of a bend. We scoot it out another fraction of an inch. Hit it down, hit it down. That's probably about as far as we want to go. We're now going to flip it over. It can be useful, we'll heat this up again, if you need to brace your tongs or the piece of steel against your hip while you're hammering back so that the bar doesn't scoot around on you too much. We give it a hit from the back, give it another hit, that's going to start curling, and we can just kind of work it around that way. Keep a close eye on it, keep everything nice and flat. Get that hot one more time. We'll give it a couple more hits here. If you need to, you can bring it up, give it taps there. You can come around, give it some taps there. That'll close things in more. I don't really need to do that. What I do need is this to go down a little bit more. So I'll put it back over the edge of the anvil, give it another tap down, a couple more from the back, and close that up. And that looks pretty reasonable. Where you're likely to go wrong with this and making nice, effective curls, the first step is actually in making that taper. If you have a taper that is not even as it progresses, if it is sort of at one angle and then it's got a hump in it, you know, so it's not a nice smooth curve, it's doing this sort of thing, that will mess up your curl. When the steel changes thickness suddenly, it is hard to get that to look like a nice smooth transition. So you need a nice straight taper to start with. The other areas that you're likely to go wrong, it's small material. Don't hit it too hard, and especially don't hit it in the same place too many times. If you do that, you'll wind up with flat spots in it and it won't look round. So when I was working here, it might have looked like I was hitting the steel in the same spot, and I was swinging the hammer to the same spot, but because every blow was curling that piece of steel, I was hitting a new spot each time. If I hit here and then I came up here and I kind of chased that same spot on the steel, it winds up squishing things, taking the roundness out. So really you want to hit once or twice in each spot. More than that and you risk flattening things. Let's make this nice and wide. We got to practice with the peen of the hammer in the next project. Let's go ahead and start early. We'll really try and spread that material out here. So I do all my peening and then I flip it over and hammer against it. The flat of the anvil will help take those peen marks out. Let's heat it up. We'll give it 1 or 2 more hits to smooth things out, and then we'll start curling. I'm going to curl this in the opposite direction of my previous one. And again, edge of the anvil. Start tapping it down. As it bends around on me, we'll come back here. And I'm going to hammer here. That won't move the entire piece, and so there is a little bit of back and forth you need to do on these wider scrolls, especially when they're thin like this. Let's get it hot though so that we can have a nice even curl here. All right. Continue to curl that around. It is important to check your curls a lot as you work on them to make sure that they do what you expect them to do. And that looks pretty good. Nice and open. Not completely closed, but I think it's got a nice motion to it there. Feels nice and lively. So, next thing we've got to do is make the loops for our S-hooks. Really a very simple process. We're going to heat up a good long section of it so that we have the entire area hot that we're going to want to potentially bend. Again, for a 1 inch, right, that's 4 1/4 inches of material that needs to be heated up if you're closing that bend all the way. So we want just around half the bar hot. We're then going to take it, quench it, just our scroll so that we can hammer on our scroll directly. Once that's cooled a little bit, we're going to put it on the horn of the anvil. We're going to hammer way out here. Anytime you're bending material, you want to hammer somewhere that has an air gap. If I hammer here, I'm going to be drawing it out. I'm going to be forging it. Only if I hammer somewhere that doesn't have steel directly under it am I going to get a bend. So, nice and hot, this part quenched, and we'll just hammer right around. One tip as we're heating this up, this is pretty thin at this point. It's going to want to burn, especially in a solid fuel forge like I've got here. What I can do when I'm putting it in is actually push it all the way through the fire so that that scroll, the thinnest part, is out of the direct line of heat. I'll bring it up a little bit slowly just to make sure that I don't burn that thin part. Into the quench tub, cool off that end. Here to the horn of the anvil where I've got it marked. That looks about right. And I'm going to hammer on that quenched end. Then I'm going to bring it around. I've got a bit of a flat here at the end, and that's because this part maybe quenched a little bit more than I needed to, but we should be sitting right there, about 1 inch internal diameter throughout this. I don't think I'm going to bother bringing this in more. If I wanted to, just be a little bit more careful with how much of that I quench, and that would help me wrap it around a little bit more. Let's do the other side now. Spin this a little bit more. Here we go, we're right at that 1-inch internal diameter. I will say, looking at this, this is a real ugly S-hook. I think doing the two different scrolling techniques on it, not a good choice from just an aesthetic standpoint. From a technique standpoint, good to try the different designs. Probably put them on different hooks though. But we've met our requirements. We have an S-hook with two 1-inch internal diameter eyes. We practice a couple different ways of scrolling. And this S-hook, very similar sort of scroll on the larger hooks as the smaller ones. I mean, it's a good project. These are easy to sell, and definitely something any smith should be able to do. It does look like I got a little bit of some overheating and burned this tip a little bit, which is why you can see it broke off there. Off camera, we had some stuff going on in the shop and I had to step away from the forge for a minute. Didn't pull it out. Lesson learned, if you are stepping away from the forge, you know, just take a second to pull the steel out. But that is 1.6, the S-hook for the national curriculum. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you shortly and take a look at leaves.